Given the relative infancy of AI and AI prompting, you can easily be forgiven for thinking that it's just about asking specific questions and getting specific answers. But there's actually a lot more that you can do with AI, and that's what we're going to look at here, looking at advanced prompting techniques for accountants, moving beyond single-use prompts to create improved workflows. So in this section, we're going to look at how you can actually use AI to create prompts for you, which is very useful, particularly if you're not quite sure how it works and how it actually gets the answers that it produces. We'll also look at multi-prompting and follow-on prompting, and finally, how you can also reverse engineer work to get a prompt that would have provided that result for you. So some really useful tips in this next section. Starting with letting GPT write its own prompts. And I've said GPT here, but this can be applied to Claude, it can be applied to XAI, it can be applied to DeepSeek, other large language models. And essentially what I mean by getting GPT to write its own prompts is, well, essentially that. Asking it to generate the prompt itself, saving time for you, saving time for your team from writing the prompts. Prompts shouldn't be, and if you've been watching these other videos in this series, you should know, is not a simple do this for me. A prompt should be a well-crafted piece of work that includes roles, it includes tasks, it includes outputs and tones and specific instructions. So you can actually get it to write a prompt that's got those instructions in it for you. And that's, of course, very useful because you can then ask it to request specific items, you can ask it for specific formats and how it's going to produce its output, produce its prompt using the specific instructions that you want to give. If you're not sure if GPT is going to realize what you want it to do, you can ask it, how would you go about creating something like this for me? So that's a very useful benefit for getting GPT to write its own prompts as well. And particularly for people who are not that versed in the work that you're doing or in AI itself, if you're very non-technical, it really helps you to get started with using artificial intelligence. So let's take a look at how we can use GPT to craft prompts for us. So we've got a very, very simple set of instructions here. Let's say we are a junior accountant, we're someone who's not used AI before, and so we're just saying, oh, I'm a junior accountant, I'm reviewing a client's key one figures. Before I put the figures in, just give me a prompt that's going to make you analyze those quarter one figures and list the key metrics where applicable. And this is then going to give us a perfect prompt, a detailed prompt that we can then use to add our figures into it and then copy and paste that prompt in, and it's going to give us a really good result. So you can see it's a really in-detailed prompt here. Please review the following figures for, we put the company name in there, form a detailed analysis of the figures and the key metrics such as X, Y, Z. The analysis should include, and then it gives a list of the metrics that should be included. And again, just simply the fact that it was able to create that far more quickly than we'd be able to type it. Even if we know that we actually want it to say that, it's saving us time there as well. And it's also a very comprehensive prompt that's also, because it's prompting itself, it knows how it works and how it will react to these prompts. So it's writing a really detailed prompt for us to use. So that's one of the first advanced tips here, is getting it to write its own prompts. We're now going to move on to follow-on prompting. Now this is where we don't just use the conversation, the chat in a single-use fashion. We ask it a question. We then ask it to build on those results. We ask it to build on it further. We then ask it to provide insights based on what it's produced so far. We then ask it to create emails based on what it's presented so far. We then ask it to summarize new plans and new strategic options, etc. Because this is often referred to as multi-task prompting as well as follow-on prompting, because if you ask it to do too much in one go, it might struggle. So by breaking the task down and keeping asking on the follow-on prompts, you get better responses. So for example, we might start with a very basic prompt like summarize this profit and loss. We don't want to try and do too much in one go, so we just ask it to summarize the key points from this profit and loss. Once we've then got that summary, we might ask it to build on those results and explain why these results are different from last year and the reasons why that might be. We then might, on top of that, ask it for further actions to improve margins. And once it's given us those actions, we might then say, okay, well, given that our client is XYZ, how would it go about implementing those actions? Give us a step-by-step approach for implementing those actions. So then you can see we're really building from that original summarize right to here are the step-by-step actions we're going to take to improve the business going forward. So again, let's take a look at how that might work in action. So you can see we've got our prompt here. Now, technically, we're not following our own four-prompt approach at the moment with the role, the task, the context, etc. But it's just for demonstrative purposes to show the value in following on and multi-prompting. So we'll ask it to summarize these Q1 results, first of all. And we'll just give it a moment while it does that. And we can see it is writing a summary. So we'll wait for it to finish summarizing it, and then we'll ask it to please explain in more detail the difference from last year's results. And so now it's built on that, asking us telling us what the difference may have been from the revenue growth for the increase in service income. This could reflect new service offerings, expanded client base, better utilization, etc. So we'll let it finish there. And then we'll ask it to please provide strategic methods of growth for improving margins. Again, that's just typing that up quickly, but something to that effect. So it's now going to provide us with ways in which we could expand our margins, perhaps identify and promote the most profitable services, consider service bundles, premium service tiers, upsell and cross-sell, how we could reduce the cost of sales, negotiate better supplier contracts, optimize packaging, reduce waste. Again, decent actions for the next steps. So what we might then in turn do is look at some of these and say, okay, we want to look at expanding the high margin services, such as identify and promote the most profitable services. So maybe we copy that. And then we might say, please provide a step-by-step guide to achieving, and just post that action in there. And then it's going to give us information on how we actually go about doing that. And you could repeat that process for all those different actions And by the time that you've done that, just think about how much value you're actually giving back to your clients. And how, in a sense, straightforward it's been just to keep acting and expanding, asking GPT to build on the outputs time and time again. So that's how you use follow-on prompting, how you use multi-prompting effectively. Because it's still going now, it's still giving us, it's even given us a summary of the actions. And as I said, we could promote that, we could review that, we could look at each of the actions given in turn. So that's another tip there, advanced tip on follow-on prompting. Now we're going to look at reverse engineering prompts. And this happens, or this is a useful tip when you have an output that you like, where you've achieved an output and you want to have that as a template. You want to be able to replicate that time and time again. So what we can actually do is we can, as the name suggests, reverse engineer that prompt, or reverse engineer the outcome to find the prompt that would have given us that result. So we start by picking a good result. Either that is something that we have, through trial and error, found in ChatGPT, or perhaps it's an existing example of a really good report that your organization uses, and you want to be able to find a prompt that's going to allow you to put any new data in and get that same result. So you essentially want to ask it how it worked, what prompt actually would have created this. It will also then help you to understand how AI works, how it gets from the prompt to the output. And then that will then provide you with an approach to use for future tasks. So let's go back to our prompts or our outputs and see if we can reverse engineer those prompts. So you can see we are back now at our summary table. When we asked GPT, we used several follow-on prompts to basically ask it how we could go about improving our margins. So what we might do is now say, please describe, sorry, I can't spell. Please describe the prompt that would end up with you providing strategic actions from an initial input of an Excel spreadsheet, as we did above. And you can then see it's now given us an explanation. So rather than going through and asking those different prompts, if we'd have just inserted that profit and loss statement on the Excel spreadsheet and asked it to work through these 3 steps, it would have got us to that result first time. You can see it's actually provided us with an explanation of how it got there. And we could go even a step further, and rather than just saying, please describe for me the situation that would give you this, we could edit that. And instead of asking that, we'd just say, what prompt provided this outcome? And you can see it takes us back through the prompts that we gave before giving us a new template for how we could achieve this in the future. So another example of advanced prompting there, how you can use GPT to analyze the output to find out what the input would be so you can provide better prompts in the future. Another important point here, and this is particularly relevant for yourselves as accountants, people working in a very regulated and compliant industry, is you can also ask GPT to review itself. So either by prompting it once it's completed an output, or by copying and pasting the output out and putting it into another chat and asking it to review this content. So perhaps actually asking it, how did you get this result? Use it as a form of quality control. Review your response. How did you get to this outcome? If you've asked it to explain the latest tax laws, for example, review your response for clarity and for facts, and show me the sources where you found that information from. You can then even use it to make it more focused and more streamlined. Yes, I agree with what your review that you've done. We all agree that it's a good output, but I want you to just make it a bit more punchier. I want you to make it a bit more focused, and I want you to check whether you missed anything important. Please review, say, put the HMRC's website link in there. Please review this website and see, did you miss anything important? And once you have done this, once you have started to use GPT to critique itself, to review its own output, it's almost like you have an instant peer review. Rather than getting your colleague to check your work, you've now got GPT checking your work, or GPT checking the outputs. Now, of course, that doesn't remove the need for human oversight as a whole, but what it does do is it allows you to use GPT or use your large language model to check its own working, and in many cases it will identify its own mistakes if it has made mistakes. Not saying it always does, but it will be able to actually identify its own mistakes if you specifically ask it to re-review its output and find if it's made any mistakes. So another really important tool there for using, or tip for using GPT at a more advanced level. So some key takeaways from this section. Always try to ask it for better prompts. AI knows how it works better than you know how it works. So if you want it to do something, explain to it what you want it to do, and then rather than just say do it, ask it how I should instruct you to do this. And then it will provide with a far better prompt that links into how it actually works to give you a better output. Also, use multi-step tasks. That way it can work on things one by one and provide better results each time. If you ask it to do too much at once, it may not give as good a review. So break down tasks into step-by-steps, just as how you would approach them if you were the one that was doing the task, and you'll get better results. And ask specific follow-ons in the same chat so that it is using the same information and building on it time and time again. You can also reverse engineer your prompts to learn from good outputs and good results. If you've got something that you want to replicate time and time again, ask it the prompt that would get this result, and then use that as a template in the future. And also use AI to review and improve its own work. Always keep asking it, are you sure about this? Are you sure about that? Show me your working. Okay, it's a good output now, but make it better. Make it more formal. Make it less formal. Make it more conversational. Make it tighter and more succinct. Whatever it may be. And if you start mastering those tips on top of using the correct format of prompts, include the role, task, tone, context, etc., you're going to be a really good GPT user, and you're going to be able to get the maximum amount of use for it to improve your workload and to improve your efficiency.